Hi, grade 4. I'm just going to read you a little bit of Wolf Hollow. Our old barn taught me one of the most important lessons I was ever to learn, that the extraordinary can live in the simplest things. Each season meant a world refashioned inside its stalls and storerooms. Pockets of warmth in winter, the milk cows and draft horses like furnaces, their heat banked by straw bedding and new manure. In spring, swallows fledged from their muddy nests wedged in crannies overhead, and kittens, fresh and soft, staggered between the hooves and attacked the tails of tackle hanging from stable pigs. Come summer, the yellow jackets nested in the straw, and old oats sprouted through the floorboards. Houdini hens laid eggs in odd places, where they might yield chicks, and dusty sunlight stripped the air like bridges to somewhere else. But I loved the barn in the fall, especially when I opened to find my father there, mending wagon wheels, oiling joints of wagon parts, and sometimes, as on that November day, napping in the hayloft, snoring softly in the dim blue light. "Mrs. Taylor's here to see you," I said softly in his ear, while the rain thrummed on the tin roof just above our heads, and the horses stamped for their oats below us. "Wake up." My father roused suddenly from continents away. "What?" he said, sitting up in the hay. "Mrs. Taylor's here to see you," I repeated. I sat back on my heels. "You have straw in your hair." He pawed it away and plucked off a stubborn bit, and we both rose and climbed down the hayloft ladder, my father clearing his throat and shaking the sleep from his head. "I was just having a little rest," he said, as we walked abreast down the dim stairs into the stable below. He ran his hands through his hair. "Mrs. Taylor, you say?" "She wants to talk with you and Mother." He looked at me sharply. "What did James do?" "Nothing. Henry neither. I don't know what it's about, but I think it has something to do with Betty." My father sighed as he pulled his hood up over his head. "I've had about my fill of that," he said, and he walked straight out into the hard rain. By the time we pulled off our boots and hung up our wet ponchos, my mother made coffee and put some oatmeal cookies on a plate. Mrs. Taylor was waiting for us in the front room, perched at the edge of the chair, her hands folded, as if we had bad news for her. I was afraid it would be the other way around. "I'm not sure Annabelle needs to be part of this," she said hesitantly once we were all seated. "Well, I'm not sure what this is," Mother said, "but if it has anything to do with what happened to Ruth, she ought to be here to hear it. She's been right in the middle of this mess from the start." Mrs. Taylor nodded. "If you think it's all right." She spent a moment quietly unfocused, and then she looked up and said, "I understand that Betty claims that she was in the belfry looking out the window when she saw Toby throw the rock that hit Ruth." My father nodded. "That's what she says." "Only that can't be right," Mrs. Taylor said. "A few days before Ruth got hurt, I caught Betty and Andy up in the belfry at recess, so I shooed them out, and then I locked the door that leads to the stairs. It was still locked today when I tried it, and I have the only key right here," and she patted her pocketbook. "One more lie," my mother said quietly. "One more big lie," I said, trailing off as everybody turned to look at me. "What? It's true. Betty didn't see Toby do a thing. Betty's a bully. She's mad at him because he told her to leave me alone." My father took my hand. "It's okay, Annabelle. You're not wrong. Betty had a lie already on her tongue because she'd been up in the belfry before and knew just what to say." Mrs. Taylor sighed. "That doesn't seem to fit. Would you please go tell that to Constable Oleska?" I said. She nodded. "I will," she said. "But I wanted to come to see you first. The Glengarrys are my friends, and I didn't want to make an accusation without talking about it first." "No accusation about it," my father said. "Just information. The constable will do with it whatever he can." For days I'd been feeling tense as a banjo string, twanging every time there was some new problem that arose. But there were also moments of relief like this one. Finally, maybe, people were beginning to understand what kind of person Betty really was. Mrs. Taylor stood up, and we were with her. Betty didn't come to school today. I imagine she's homesick. Perhaps I should go and speak with the Glengarrys first before I see the constable. My mother shook her head. We've been in your shoes, and lately, it won't do any good. They're set on the idea that Betty hasn't done anything wrong. Mrs. Taylor nodded. I expect you're right about that. Betty's an odd girl, but she's their granddaughter. We didn't talk about the rest of it, how badly she had bullied me, how I suspected she and Andy had hurt James. But the lid was off, the worms were rearing their slick little heads, and they would soon be spilling out with their mucky secrets. I can't say I was glad exactly, but I wasn't sorry. Okay, so I think we'll leave it at chapter 11 and do chapter 12 another day. So there's more about what Betty has been up to, and Annabelle is trying to kind of make sure that everybody knows that it's not Toby. So we'll see what's to come. Talk to you soon.